What if everything you thought you knew about Meghan Markle, the poised, glamorous, unstoppable Duchess of Sussex, was only half the story? What if behind those perfectly curated smiles, the red carpet poses, and the fairy tale headlines, there was a secret so personal, so devastating, that it silently shaped the course of her first marriage? Trevor Engelson, the man who once vowed to spend forever with her, is finally breaking his silence. And what he reveals isn't just shocking. It changes everything. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. From the moment Meghan Markle walked into Hollywood as an ambitious, hopeful actress, people thought they knew her. The bright smile, the confident stride, the aura of someone who had it all under control. But life, as Trevor Engelson would later realize, is rarely that simple. Behind closed doors, Meghan was wrestling with a tragedy she had kept hidden from everyone, even the man she loved. At 21, she lost her womb. No one knew. Few could imagine the silent weight this loss carried, and how it would subtly, but inexorably, influence her relationships, her decisions, and the marriage that seemed destined to be a love story for the ages. Trevor Engelson remembers those early days vividly. They met in New York, and sparks flew immediately. She was brilliant, witty, ambitious, and somehow instantly relatable despite the fame and connections around her. He was smitten, and she, too, was drawn to him. Their lives, for a brief moment, seemed perfectly aligned. They shared jokes, late-night conversations, dreams about the future. But beneath that radiant exterior, Meghan was guarding a secret. It was not something she could explain casually over dinner, nor something that could easily be disclosed in the early days of a whirlwind romance. The public never saw the nights Meghan spent in silent contemplation, or the moments where she wrestled with pain that had nothing to do with career setbacks or Hollywood pressures. Losing her womb at such a young age left scars, physical, emotional, and psychological. How do you tell your partner something so intimate, so defining, when the world expects you to be perfect? How do you admit that the path you envisioned for yourself, the life you imagined building together, might never unfold as planned? These were questions Meghan grappled with, questions she feared would push Trevor away, or worse, change the way he loved her. And yet, Trevor stayed, at least for a time. Their relationship continued, marked by laughter, shared adventures, and the kind of easy companionship that makes everyone around them think they are made for each other. They were the couple friends envied, the couple paparazzi captured smiling on yachts, at premieres, on romantic getaways. But Trevor began noticing subtle changes. A pause here, a sigh there, a hesitation when discussing the future. He chalked it up to normal stress. He did not yet know the depth of the storm Meghan carried quietly inside her. Hollywood is a world obsessed with appearances, where every smile, every pose, every public interaction is meticulously curated. In that environment, Meghan's secret weighed even heavier. She could not reveal it to colleagues or friends. She could not risk judgment or pity, not when her career demanded confidence and poise. And the heavier her secret grew, the more invisible walls formed between her and Trevor. It wasn't anyone's fault. Trauma, after all, is an invisible force, and love, even true love, sometimes struggles to bridge the gaps it creates. Trevor would later admit that he sensed something was off long before the marriage's public unraveling. There were moments when he would ask, carefully, gently, if everything was okay. Meghan would smile, laugh it off, redirect, or change the subject. And every time, Trevor felt the invisible thread between them tighten, the subtle distance widening just a little more. For those watching from the outside, everything seemed perfect. For those watching from the inside, the clock was quietly ticking down toward a breaking point neither of them wanted to face. Then came the wedding. A Hollywood celebration, private yet grand, full of friends, family, and the promise of a future together. Trevor remembers it as one of the happiest days of his life. Meghan looked radiant, every step confident, every smile genuine. Yet even as the cameras flashed and the world applauded, the undercurrent of unspoken truths remained. Trevor didn't know it then, but the events of that day, the union that seemed destined for bliss, would eventually be seen in an entirely different light. once the private struggles and secrets were laid bare. Trevor Engelson's decision to finally speak publicly did not come lightly. For years, he remained silent, not because he was bitter or because he wanted to hurt Meghan, but because some stories, especially the most personal and painful ones, are not easy to tell. Some truths require courage, a willingness to face public scrutiny, and the knowledge that revealing them may alter public perception permanently. And yet, after years of reflection, Trevor realized that the full story mattered. People had seen headlines, rumors, and speculation, but they had never seen the human reality, the private trials, the heartbreak, and the silent struggles that shaped a marriage destined to captivate the world. In sharing his account, Trevor invites us into a story far more nuanced than the public ever imagined. It's a story of love and loss, ambition and secrecy, resilience and heartbreak. It's a story that challenges the black and white narratives of celebrity marriages and reminds us that even the most polished lives are made up of hidden struggles. And perhaps most importantly, it is a story that gives context to the choices Meghan made, the path she pursued, and the life she ultimately led after the marriage ended. But what truly sets this revelation apart is the secret at the heart of it, the medical trauma Meghan endured at just 21. Losing her womb was not merely a personal setback. It was an event that influenced her identity, her emotions, her hopes, and ultimately, her marriage. Imagine carrying a loss so profound in silence, in a world that prizes image over truth, perfection over vulnerability. For Trevor, understanding this trauma was both enlightening and heartbreaking. For the public, it challenges everything previously assumed about Meghan Markle's personal narrative and her decisions in love and life. And now, the world will hear this story. Trevor Engelson will explain, with candor and emotion, why their marriage ended, not because of Hollywood pressures, not because of ambition alone, but because the weight of unspoken pain and secrets can quietly, inexorably, reshape a love story. And as he reveals this truth, we are left to reconsider everything we thought we knew about Meghan Markle, the woman, the Duchess, the private individual behind the headlines. For viewers, this is more than a tale of celebrity romance. It is a human story. It is about the invisible forces that shape relationships, the personal traumas that influence decisions, and the courage it takes to eventually speak truthfully, even when it may alter public perception forever. As we dive into Trevor Engelson's revelations, the questions are unavoidable. How much of love is determined by circumstances we cannot control? How do personal tragedies intersect with relationships, careers, and public life? And, ultimately, what does it mean to truly understand someone when the most important parts of their story remain hidden for years? What does it really feel like to fall in love with someone who seems perfect in every way, yet carries invisible burdens you can't yet see? For Trevor Engelson, meeting Meghan Markle was like stepping into a dream he never wanted to wake from. But dreams, as we often discover, have edges sharp enough to cut. Trevor first met Meghan in New York City at a mutual friends gathering, a low-key event that, in hindsight, would change both of their lives forever. She was radiant, yes, but not in the way celebrity magazines often describe her. She was approachable. She laughed with her whole body, a genuine sound that drew people in. There was a warmth, an intelligence, a lightness that Trevor found intoxicating. But more than that, there was an undercurrent of something deeper, a curiosity, a sense that she had stories behind her eyes, experiences she didn't yet share. From the very first conversation, Trevor felt both captivated and slightly unprepared. She asked questions that went beyond superficial chatter, questions that challenged him to think about his values, ambitions, and his dreams for the future. Most people would have been intimidated. Trevor was intrigued. He remembers thinking, here's someone who sees me, really sees me, in a way no one else has. They began spending more time together. Coffee dates that stretched into afternoon walks, late-night phone calls that stretched into early mornings. There was laughter, shared secrets, the kind of joy that makes you forget the rest of the world exists. And yet, even in those first moments, there were subtle hints of the challenges ahead. Meghan's charm was effortless, but her eyes sometimes betrayed a hint of sadness, a flicker of something private. Trevor noticed it. He brushed it aside. Everyone has moments of quiet reflection, he thought. She's focused, ambitious, she's simply processing her life. But the universe has a way of inserting complexity into even the most seemingly perfect love stories. The deeper they grew closer, the more Trevor sensed there were walls around certain aspects of her life. Questions about family, about early adulthood, about deeply personal experiences, these were met with carefully measured responses. Not lies, not deception, but omissions. The things left unsaid carried weight. And though Trevor loved her, he had no idea the magnitude of what she was carrying. During their courtship, Meghan's life was far from ordinary. She was navigating Hollywood's complex social circles, auditions, career opportunities, and media attention. She was brilliant, hardworking, and deeply aware of the optics of every public interaction. But beneath the glitz, there were challenges she didn't discuss openly. The trauma she endured at 21, the loss of her womb, was a wound she bore privately. It shaped her fears, her hopes, her sense of self. It influenced her decisions in ways Trevor would only understand years later. Trevor tried to be supportive. He asked questions gently, gave space when she seemed distant, tried to reassure her that she could share anything with him. Meghan appreciated this, yet she remained protective of certain truths. How do you explain a loss so personal, so intimate, without fearing it will change the way your partner sees you? She was learning, as many people do, that love is often tested not by the moments of joy, but by the hidden struggles we carry silently. Their relationship moved forward with excitement and promise. Friends noticed the chemistry, the ease between them, the way Meghan's laughter seemed to echo Trevor's own joy. They were photographed together at industry events, casually yet elegantly, always seeming in sync. Yet there were moments only they would ever know, moments of quiet vulnerability, late-night talks that explored fears and dreams. These moments, though unseen by the public, were the foundation of their connection. And then came the first hints of tension. Small things at first, slight misunderstandings about priorities, subtle differences in lifestyle expectations, the unspoken pressures of success and public perception. Trevor noticed Meghan sometimes seemed distracted, reflective, as though she were carrying an invisible burden. He didn't fully comprehend it, but he trusted that love, at its core, could navigate these waters. He wanted to be patient, to understand, to support. They laughed together. They traveled together. They shared dreams. Yet beneath the laughter, beneath the photographs and appearances, there was an undercurrent of complexity, a silent layer of reality that neither of them could fully articulate. Love, Trevor would later realize, was never just about joy. It was about navigating the unseen, the unspoken, the private battles each person carries. And Meghan, brilliant and beautiful though she was no exception. Trevor often reflects on those early days with a mixture of nostalgia and melancholy. The excitement of new love, the thrill of connection, the belief that anything was possible. It was intoxicating. But even then, there were cracks forming quietly, almost imperceptibly. The laughter, the connection, the adventures, they were real. But reality, as Trevor would later understand, has a way of intruding, of reshaping even the most beautiful beginnings. Through it all, Trevor was captivated not just by Meghan's charm, but by her resilience, her intelligence, her ability to navigate life with grace despite challenges he could not yet see. He was drawn to her strength, even in moments of vulnerability. And perhaps that was part of the complexity. He fell in love with both the woman she presented to the world and the one he sensed existed beneath the surface, even before he fully understood the depth of her private pain. This is where the story begins to take shape, not in headlines, not in photographs, but in the private moments that define a relationship. The conversations that happen in whispers, the silent reassurances, the laughter shared in moments of fleeting normalcy. These are the threads of a love story that would eventually captivate the world, yet be tested in ways neither of them anticipated. Trevor Engelson's perspective is crucial here because it offers a window into a relationship that the public only ever saw partially. We saw weddings, appearances, social outings, and media coverage, but none of these capture the intricate, often painful, private realities of their connection. Trevor's insight allows us to understand not just the what, But the why, the hidden motivations, the unspoken truths, the impact of personal trauma on a relationship that seemed flawless from the outside. So as we delve deeper into their story, consider this. How much of love is shaped by what we cannot see? How much is influenced by unspoken pain, by secrets we carry alone? Trevor Engelson's account will illuminate these questions in ways that are both heartbreaking and enlightening. It is a story that challenges the surface-level narratives, demanding we look beyond public images to the human experiences that truly define relationships. And just when it seemed that everything was unfolding perfectly, when their love seemed poised to endure life's challenges, the invisible truths Meghan carried began to quietly assert themselves. Small tensions became recurring issues. Questions about the future, about family, about intimacy, about life goals. These were colored by experiences Trevor could not yet understand. And Meghan, protective of both herself and the fragile connection they had, kept her most painful secret to herself. For Trevor, the realization would come slowly. A subtle shift in behavior, a moment of hesitation, a sense that something crucial remained unshared. At first, he blamed external pressures, Hollywood, busy schedules, public scrutiny. But deep down, he sensed there was something more, something intimately personal that he was not yet privy to. The love was real, the connection genuine, but the hidden challenges were quietly building a wall between them, one layer at a time. And that is the story of the fairy tale beginning, a love that was bright, magnetic, and full of promise, yet shadowed by invisible truths. Trevor Engelson and Meghan Markle were in love, but love alone, as he would later understand, sometimes is not enough to navigate the complexity of unspoken pain, personal trauma, and the weight of private secrets. As they embarked on this journey together, the world only saw smiles and laughter. The private reality was far more nuanced, far more challenging. And just when it felt like the dream could last forever, the first real cracks began to appear, small, subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to hint that even the brightest beginnings can face profound challenges. But what came next would force them both to confront truths they had long avoided, and the outcome would shock everyone, including Trevor himself. Who was Meghan Markle before the red carpets, the royal titles, the public scrutiny? What shaped the woman who would one day become the Duchess of Sussex? And how did those early experiences quietly influence the love story with Trevor Engelson? Before the cameras, before Hollywood premieres, before global attention, Meghan was just a young woman trying to navigate life on her own terms. At 21, most people are exploring their independence, their passions, their careers, and their identities. For Meghan, this was compounded by an experience few could understand. She had lost her womb, a private, deeply personal tragedy that she carried silently, without the comfort of public sympathy or even intimate reassurance. Imagine that, a young woman with ambition, charm, and drive, navigating a city full of opportunity while managing a loss that would forever change her relationship with her own body, her future, and her sense of possibility. Losing her womb at 21 was more than a physical trauma. It was a psychological and emotional challenge that left its mark on everything she would later experience, including her first marriage. Trevor Engelson didn't know this at the time. The man she loved, the man who would one day marry her, could not see the nights Meghan spent alone, reflecting on what she had lost. How do you explain to someone that part of your body, part of your ability to create life, has been taken from you, not by choice, but by circumstance? How do you share a grief so intimate, so isolating, without fearing it might alter the course of love you desperately want to protect? Meghan wrestled with these questions privately, building walls around the parts of her life that were too painful to reveal. In those early years, Meghan's life was a balancing act. She was pursuing acting opportunities in New York and later Los Angeles, navigating auditions, callbacks, and networking events. She was ambitious, determined, and ready to take on the challenges of a notoriously competitive industry. Yet she carried a silent weight, a grief she could not fully share, a future she could not entirely envision. Her work ethic was remarkable. Meghan was always early, prepared, articulate, and charming. She had an ease with people, a natural ability to connect, that made her stand out in auditions and social circles alike. Yet, behind the charisma and the confidence, there was an undercurrent of uncertainty, a private struggle that shaped her decision-making and interactions. She was learning, in real time, how to project strength while hiding vulnerability, how to appear in control while managing personal loss. Trevor Engelson, when they met, saw the charm, the confidence, the humor. He saw the woman who could command a room, who could captivate anyone with a smile or a witty remark. But he didn't see the late nights of silent reflection, the moments where Meghan confronted the reality of her body and her future. He didn't know that the very core of her identity had been altered in a way she felt she could not share. It's important to understand just how isolating this experience was. At 21, Meghan was navigating life's typical pressures, career uncertainty, family expectations, social dynamics, while carrying a secret that impacted her most intimate hopes. The ceremony itself was breathtaking. Guests were moved by the emotion, the sincerity, and the palpable connection between Meghan and Trevor. Vows were exchanged with heartfelt sincerity, promises of lifelong love and partnership ringing through the air. The photographs captured smiles, laughter, and moments of pure joy. For those looking from the outside, the wedding seemed perfect, a love story brought to life in the kind of cinematic detail that could fill magazine spreads for months to come. Yet, even amidst this celebration, subtle dynamics were at play. Trevor noticed Meghan's occasional pauses, moments where her gaze seemed distant or her laughter slightly tempered. He chalked it up to nerves, the stress of the day, or the weight of being the center of attention. What he didn't yet understand was that these pauses were windows into a deeper, private experience that she had carried for years, one that had shaped her identity and her approach to love in ways he could not yet see. The reception that followed was lively and joyful, a mix of heartfelt speeches, music, and dancing. Friends toasted to the couple's happiness, capturing moments that would later become iconic in their shared history. There was a sense of exuberance, of possibility, of a future unbounded by past struggles. And yet, beneath the laughter and celebration, the quiet weight of private truths lingered. These invisible threads would later reveal themselves as critical factors in the dynamics of their marriage, shaping choices, conversations, and emotional intimacy. Trevor remembers the evening with a mixture of joy and nostalgia. He recalls dancing with Meghan, the warmth of her hand in his, the way her laughter seemed to light up the room. It was a magical night, emblematic of the love they shared. But he also sensed, even in the height of celebration, the invisible barriers that life and experience had placed between them. Small moments, a hesitant smile, a fleeting pause, a reflective gaze, were subtle reminders that even the happiest of occasions cannot erase the complexities each person carries internally. This is where the story begins to reveal its depth. Love, even when celebrated publicly, is complicated by private realities. For Meghan, the trauma of losing her womb at 21 was an undercurrent shaping her perception of intimacy, her sense of agency in the relationship, and her approach to future planning. For Trevor, the challenge was understanding the invisible dimensions of the woman he loved, recognizing that love alone could not always navigate the intersection of personal grief, ambition, and unspoken vulnerabilities. As the evening drew to a close, the couple retreated to private moments, away from cameras and guests. Here, the intimacy of their connection became more pronounced, as did the subtle tensions born of unspoken truths. They celebrated their love, yes, but they also navigated the quiet complexities of partnership, aligning goals, managing expectations, and reconciling the public celebration with private realities. These early negotiations, while seemingly minor, were the first hints of the challenges that would later become central to their relationship. It's tempting to view celebrity weddings through the lens of spectacle, the dresses, the venues, the headlines. But what matters most in these moments is rarely what is visible to the public. It is the interaction between individuals, the unspoken understandings, the quiet negotiations of emotion and expectation. For Meghan and Trevor, the wedding was both a triumph and a starting point, a symbol of love celebrated publicly and a moment that would later underscore the private complexities they would face. Their honeymoon period, though filled with joy and excitement, was also a time of subtle discovery. Trevor noticed nuances in Meghan's behavior, hesitations, reflective pauses, and moments of quiet contemplation. These were not flaws, nor signs of disinterest. They were glimpses into the deeper emotional realities she carried. Her personal trauma, though invisible, influenced her approach to intimacy and commitment, shaping decisions in ways he could not yet fully grasp. And yet, for all these complexities, there was undeniable connection. They laughed together, shared dreams, and built memories that would endure long after the public moved on to the next headline. The wedding was a high point, a celebration of love in its fullest form. But it also marked the beginning of a journey in which private realities would inevitably intersect with public expectations, ambition, and the pressures of early marriage. Trevor Engelson's reflections on the wedding are tinged with both happiness and poignancy. He cherishes the love they shared, the joy of that day, and the beauty of the celebration. But he also acknowledges the subtle undercurrents, unspoken truths, private grief, and the invisible challenges that foreshadowed the complexities ahead. The wedding, in all its perfection, was a poignant reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that even the happiest of unions can carry hidden struggles beneath the surface. As they settled into married life, the first signs of tension began to emerge. Small disagreements, subtle misunderstandings, and the invisible weight of unspoken truths started to create fissures. Trevor noticed Meghan's occasional hesitation when discussing long-term plans, the careful language she used to navigate delicate topics, and the reflective moments that seemed to linger longer than the joy of the celebration. These were subtle indicators, almost imperceptible at the time, that the relationship, while strong, faced challenges rooted in private realities. And just when it seemed that the fairy tale had unfolded perfectly, the reality of personal trauma, ambition, and unspoken expectations began to shape the early days of their marriage. The same love that had brought them together, the laughter, the connection, the shared dreams, was now navigating the invisible currents of grief, personal loss, and differing life experiences. These dynamics, largely unseen by the world, would later become central to understanding why their marriage, despite its promise, faced profound challenges. But what came next would reveal just how much unspoken truths and private struggles can influence love, intimacy, and life decisions, and the impact would ripple far beyond their personal story, capturing the attention of the world in ways neither of them anticipated. What if the perfect smiles and the laughter you see in public are hiding battles so intimate, so personal, that no one, not even your closest partner, truly understands them? For Meghan Markle and Trevor Engelson, their marriage had begun in a whirlwind of love, excitement, and public adoration. But behind the camera flashes, behind the laughter and champagne, private struggles quietly began to shape the contours of their relationship. The early months of their marriage were, outwardly, everything one could hope for. Friends envied their connection. Family members smiled at the harmony they projected. Social events, premieres, and vacations painted a picture of a couple in love, thriving together. But private life is rarely as straightforward as appearances suggest. Behind closed doors, Meghan carried with her the silent shadow of losing her womb at 21, a trauma that affected more than just her sense of the future. It affected her emotional availability, her intimacy, and her trust in others. For Trevor, this period was both joyful and perplexing. He adored Meghan, her intelligence, her humor, and the warmth she brought to every room. Yet there were moments he couldn't fully understand, hesitations, pauses, emotional distance that seemed inconsistent with the closeness they shared publicly. He asked questions, gently probed, tried to offer reassurance. Meghan responded with care, but the deepest truths remained carefully guarded. How could she explain something so personal, so defining, without fearing it would change the way he loved her? The tension was subtle, almost imperceptible at first. It manifested in small disagreements, minor misunderstandings about plans, slight differences in emotional expression, nuanced disagreements about expectations for the future. These were not fights, at least not in the traditional sense. They were quiet, almost invisible, shaped by the invisible weight Meghan carried. And while Trevor's love was unwavering, he struggled to reconcile the joy he felt in their connection with the subtle distance he sensed creeping into their interactions. Meghan herself faced a complex emotional landscape. Losing her womb had shaped her sense of identity in profound ways. It was not something she had come to terms with easily, nor was it a story she could share lightly. Intimacy, a cornerstone of any marriage, carried with it layers of fear, vulnerability, and uncertainty. She loved Trevor deeply, but she also had to navigate the emotional reality of a loss that had been imposed on her at a formative age. Every decision, every conversation about the future was colored by this hidden truth. Their public life, meanwhile, demanded appearances of perfection. Hollywood is relentless, and every smile, every pose, every gesture is scrutinized. For Meghan, the pressure to appear happy, confident, and in control was constant. Trevor understood this in part. He too navigated an industry obsessed with image, but he could not see the internal struggle that accompanied each public appearance. Each smile, each laugh, each shared moment in the spotlight required emotional energy, a careful masking of private grief that few could comprehend. Friends and colleagues noticed Meghan's charm, her poise, and her warmth. Few recognized the resilience it took to maintain that image. Few realized that beneath the laughter was a woman managing an invisible scar, one that affected not only her personal life, but the very foundation of her marriage. Trevor, though deeply attuned to her moods, could only sense the layers of complexity without fully understanding their origin. This delicate balancing act, love, ambition, personal trauma, and public perception, shaped every moment of their early marriage. Trevor's perspective was one of support and curiosity. He wanted to understand, to help, to love without conditions. Meghan, however, was navigating a world where vulnerability could be misinterpreted, where revealing the truth might risk the intimacy she cherished most. She loved Trevor, but she also loved her independence, her privacy, and the ability to manage her pain on her own terms. Even small disagreements became magnified by the invisible weight Meghan carried. Discussions about starting a family, career priorities, and long-term goals were subtly influenced by what she could not yet share. Trevor, unaware of the full scope, sometimes felt frustration or confusion. He loved her, but he also craved transparency, the sense that their paths were fully aligned. Meghan's private grief created gaps in communication, spaces where uncertainty quietly crept in. And yet, despite these challenges, the connection remained strong. The laughter, shared adventures, and moments of intimacy were real, profound, and deeply meaningful. They found joy in one another, moments of lightness that contrasted the heavier emotional realities each carried. The love they shared was genuine, even as the hidden struggles created complexity. It's essential to understand that private pain often coexists with public happiness. Meghan and Trevor's marriage exemplifies this paradox. Outwardly, they were a shining couple, celebrated and admired. Inwardly, they navigated layers of unspoken trauma, emotional vulnerability, and the challenges of reconciling private reality with public expectation. This duality, invisible to most, was a defining feature of their relationship. Trevor would later reflect on these early months with a mixture of fondness and melancholy. He cherished the laughter, the warmth, and the shared dreams. But he also recognized the subtle indicators. Hesitations, reflective pauses, and moments of private tension that foreshadowed the deeper challenges to come. The smiles were real, but they coexisted with unspoken truths, quietly shaping the dynamics of their marriage. As time passed, these private struggles began to influence more than just emotional intimacy. Career decisions, social interactions, and long-term planning were all subtly affected. Meghan's unspoken trauma impacted her comfort with vulnerability, while Trevor's desire for alignment and transparency clashed at times with her need for privacy and self-protection. It was not conflict in the traditional sense, but a quiet friction, invisible yet significant, influencing the early trajectory of their life together. And yet, despite all of this, love endured. They laughed together, supported one another, and built a shared world full of hope and possibility. Their bond was not diminished by private struggle, it was complicated by it. This complexity, while invisible to outsiders, was critical to understanding the eventual evolution of their relationship. But the tension of balancing private struggles with public appearances was only the beginning. As their marriage progressed, the unspoken truths would begin to assert themselves more strongly, influencing decisions, shaping interactions, and ultimately leading to moments that neither Trevor nor Meghan could ignore. The foundation of love was real, but even the strongest foundation can be tested when personal grief remains unshared, when trauma quietly shapes expectations and choices. And just when it seemed that their private world could remain hidden from public scrutiny, life had a way of exposing the intersections between grief, ambition, intimacy, and societal expectation. The challenges Meghan carried quietly inside her would inevitably collide with the dynamics of marriage, revealing the limitations of love alone to resolve the complexities of human experience. But what came next would push them both to confront these truths, forcing decisions and revelations that would forever alter the story of their relationship, and the world would be watching. What happens when love collides with ambition? When two people who adore each other are pulled in different directions by career, opportunity, and personal goals. For Meghan Markle and Trevor Engelson, rising ambitions were exciting, intoxicating, but they also introduced pressures neither fully anticipated. In the months following their wedding, Meghan's career momentum accelerated. She was landing roles, attending high-profile events, and building connections that promised future opportunities. Trevor, while supportive, was also navigating his own path in film production, managing projects, seeking new ventures, and trying to establish himself in a competitive industry. Both were driven, both ambitious, and both striving to excel in worlds that often demanded more than they could give individually. For Meghan, ambition was inseparable from identity. She had spent years carving out her space in Hollywood, balancing public appearances with auditions, networking, and the constant pressure to be on at every turn. Losing her womb at 21 had already shaped her sense of agency and independence. She was determined to control her career, her life, and her narrative. Ambition wasn't just a goal. It was a necessity, a way to assert autonomy and strength in a world that often judged women harshly. Trevor admired this drive. He loved that she was fearless, articulate, and relentless. Yet admiration was often accompanied by subtle tension. While he wanted to support her fully, there were moments when the pace of her career, the demands of her ambition, and the increasing attention she received left him feeling slightly adrift. He was part of her world, but at times, it felt as though he was navigating the periphery, trying to match the rhythm of someone moving at a relentless speed. Their relationship began to navigate a delicate balance, love and admiration on one side, pressure and adjustment on the other. Small moments, almost imperceptible at first, became indicators of the growing complexity between them. Dinner conversations occasionally turned to future plans or career decisions, where subtle differences in priorities emerged. Trevor wanted balance. Meghan was focused on opportunity. He wanted predictability. She was chasing possibility. And neither fully understood how these differences were quietly shaping the trajectory of their marriage. Hollywood amplified these pressures. Public appearances, media scrutiny, and the omnipresence of gossip required constant attention and emotional energy. Meghan, brilliant at managing perception, excelled at projecting composure. She smiled, laughed, and engaged with the public flawlessly. But behind the scenes, there were days of exhaustion, reflection, and moments of doubt. Trevor could sense her fatigue, the fleeting moments when the weight of expectation pressed heavily on her. But he couldn't always access the inner workings of her mind, the fears, the private grief, and the lingering impact of personal trauma. Even subtle professional decisions began to ripple into their personal life. Discussions about relocating for work, managing overlapping schedules, and balancing social obligations with private life became sources of quiet tension. Meghan's rising ambitions, while inspiring, created a set of pressures Trevor hadn't fully anticipated. At times, he questioned whether they were truly aligned in terms of long-term goals. Their love was genuine, yet ambition introduced a set of hidden expectations and stresses that few outside the relationship could perceive. Trevor's perspective is particularly revealing here. He describes moments of pride at Meghan's achievements, combined with a nagging uncertainty about how these successes would affect their personal connection. He admired her drive, yet he feared it could widen the gap between them if not carefully navigated. There was no malice, no resentment. Only the natural tension that arises when two ambitious individuals attempt to align their lives while pursuing demanding careers. At the same time, Meghan was navigating her own internal pressures. She wanted success, recognition, and fulfillment, but she also wanted a marriage rooted in love, understanding, and partnership. Balancing these desires required careful negotiation of time, energy, and emotional availability. Trevor often found himself as both participant and observer, witnessing her brilliance while trying to remain an anchor in the midst of rapid professional change. The contrast between public perception and private reality was stark. To outsiders, Meghan and Trevor seemed like a perfect couple, achieving success and celebrating milestones. Behind closed doors, however, ambition introduced invisible cracks. Trevor describes conversations that felt like careful navigation. Discussions about opportunities that might require relocation, late nights spent on projects, or decisions that pulled them in slightly different directions. These were not conflicts in the traditional sense, but subtle signs of the tension ambition can create in a relationship. Meghan's unspoken trauma, her loss at 21, intersected with these pressures in nuanced ways. Her experience had shaped her independence, her approach to intimacy, and her expectations for support. Rising ambition, while exciting, also amplified the stakes. Every decision, every career move, every new opportunity had to be weighed against private considerations that Trevor couldn't yet fully comprehend. It was a delicate dance. Public appearances demanded composure, professional growth demanded focus, and personal grief demanded careful management. Friends and family noticed the evolution as well. Meghan's rising prominence, the social shift toward royal circles, and the increasing media coverage all painted a picture of opportunity, success, and excitement. But behind the scenes, Trevor and Meghan were negotiating private realities that few could perceive. Ambitions, career decisions, and personal trauma intersected in ways that complicated communication, emotional availability, and shared planning. The contrast between public appearances and private realities became increasingly pronounced. To the world, Meghan and Trevor seemed like a power couple, thriving, successful, and in love. Yet privately, subtle tensions were emerging. Trevor began to see how Meghan's exposure to new environments, new expectations, and new possibilities subtly reshaped her priorities, attention, and energy. It wasn't about diminishing love. It was about the realities of navigating personal ambition, public scrutiny, and the pressures of a life increasingly influenced by external forces. This period also highlighted the delicate balance between support and autonomy. Trevor wanted to be present, engaged, and understanding, but he also needed clarity about their shared path forward. Meghan, navigating her own ambitions and public attention, needed space to maneuver, to engage with opportunities, and to assert her agency. The intersection of these needs created subtle tension, a quiet friction that would later become more pronounced as their lives continued to diverge. And yet, the love between them remained real. They laughed together, shared dreams, and supported one another through transitions. The connection they had built over years was strong, resilient, and genuine. But love, as Trevor would later reflect, cannot always insulate a relationship from the pressures of ambition, public scrutiny, and private trauma. The royal shift was not a single event. It was a process, a gradual transformation that demanded adaptation, communication, and emotional endurance. Trevor observed how Meghan navigated these changes with intelligence and grace. She was conscious of appearances, aware of her influence, and deliberate in her choices. Yet the very factors that enabled her to thrive publicly, resilience, ambition, poise, also introduced subtle complexity into their private interactions. Conversations that had once been simple now carried layers of implication. Decisions about time, attention, and priorities became more nuanced. And small moments of hesitation, subtle reflections, and private contemplation became increasingly significant in understanding the evolving dynamics of their relationship. Friends later remarked on the couple's resilience, their ability to maintain a bond amid rapid change, and their commitment to one another. But behind this apparent harmony were forces few outsiders could perceive: ambition, opportunity, and the hidden pressures of public scrutiny interacting with deeply personal experiences and unspoken grief. Trevor Engelson's perspective sheds light on these invisible dynamics, revealing how love can coexist with complexity, tension, and transformation. As Meghan's life increasingly intersected with royal circles, the couple faced decisions they had never encountered in their earlier months together. Social obligations expanded, media attention intensified, and the trajectory of their lives became intertwined with forces beyond their control. Trevor, deeply invested in the relationship, had to navigate these shifts with care, balancing support for Meghan with his own need for clarity, connection, and understanding. And just as the public began to speculate, the couple themselves began to feel the subtle but undeniable pressures that accompany extraordinary visibility. The royal shift was more than an introduction to a new social world. It was a transformative period that tested love, communication, and emotional resilience. For Meghan, it was an opportunity. For Trevor, a challenge in understanding and supporting the partner he adored while grappling with the subtle changes in their shared life. But what came next would reveal the first cracks in a relationship tested by ambition, public scrutiny, and the unspoken forces of personal trauma. The private challenges they had managed for years would begin to assert themselves in ways that neither Trevor nor Meghan could ignore, and the outcome would ultimately reshape the narrative of their love story in ways the world would soon scrutinize. Have you ever noticed how the smallest cracks can eventually split even the strongest foundations? For Meghan Markle and Trevor Engelson, love was real, devotion was evident, but subtle fissures, almost imperceptible at first, were beginning to appear, quietly testing the resilience of their marriage. At the outset, their connection seemed unshakable. They shared laughter, late-night conversations, and dreams that intertwined like vines, wrapping their lives in the intimacy and trust that defines early love. Yet, as the weeks turned into months, Trevor began noticing small, recurring patterns, slight hesitations when discussing future plans, pauses in conversations that once flowed effortlessly, and subtle emotional distances that he couldn't fully explain. These cracks were not dramatic. There were no shouting matches, no catastrophic fights in front of friends. Instead, they were quiet, almost invisible, a sigh here, a distracted gaze there, a deflection when a particularly personal topic arose. Trevor, ever attentive and sensitive to their emotional dynamics, sensed the change. Something in Meghan's energy had shifted, even if he couldn't yet name it. For Meghan, these subtle cracks were the result of internal pressures she had long carried. Losing her womb at 21 was a wound she had managed privately, and while it had been integrated into her sense of self, it also shaped the way she navigated intimacy, trust, and the anticipation of the future. The early days of marriage had been joyful, yet they also introduced new expectations. Expectations about family planning, emotional availability, and the long-term alignment of life goals. Each conversation, each decision, carried the invisible weight of her past trauma, quietly influencing her responses and interactions. Trevor noticed these nuances with increasing frequency. He saw hesitation in her voice when discussing children or the logistics of the future. He observed reflective pauses that seemed to linger longer than the conversation itself. He felt moments of distance, brief but recurring, that contrasted with the intimacy they had once shared. Initially, he tried to rationalize them: work stress, media scrutiny, or simply the adjustment to married life. But deep down, he sensed there was more, something unspoken, quietly shaping their dynamic. At the same time, the world around them was changing. Meghan's connection with Prince Harry had intensified public interest. Every move she made, every social appearance, and every career decision was scrutinized. The media's gaze was unrelenting, amplifying minor details and speculating endlessly about their private lives. Even casual conversations between Meghan and Trevor were now potentially public fodder, adding layers of pressure that neither had previously experienced. These external pressures, combined with the private complexities of their relationship, created subtle but meaningful tension. Trevor's desire for clarity and shared vision for the future sometimes clashed with Meghan's need for privacy, autonomy, and careful navigation of both public and personal realities. It wasn't conflict in the traditional sense. It was the quiet friction that occurs when two people with deep love but differing emotional landscapes try to coexist under extraordinary circumstances. Communication, the lifeblood of any marriage, began to reflect these tensions. Conversations that had once been open, fluid, and unreserved now contained pauses, careful word choices, and moments of reflection that hinted at unspoken truths. Trevor often found himself wishing for transparency, eager to understand the full scope of what Meghan was experiencing internally. Meghan, meanwhile, navigated these discussions with caution, balancing honesty with a protective instinct shaped by years of managing personal trauma. Even minor disagreements carried weight. Discussions about family, career opportunities, or social engagements became nuanced, influenced by layers of expectation, ambition, and unspoken emotional history. A slight misalignment in priorities or timing could provoke subtle frustration or misunderstanding. Neither Meghan nor Trevor was acting with malice. They were simply contending with the realities of human emotion, private history, and the pressure of an increasingly public life. These cracks were also reflective of the delicate intersection between personal trauma and relationship dynamics. Meghan's loss at 21 was not merely a medical event. It was a profound emotional experience that shaped her identity and influenced her perceptions of intimacy and trust. In marriage, where shared plans and mutual expectations are paramount, the impact of unspoken trauma can manifest in small but cumulative ways. Trevor, perceptive as he was, could sense the gaps, even if he did not yet understand their origins. The couple's interactions became a mix of joy and tension. They laughed together, enjoyed outings, and maintained the outward appearances of a strong, connected couple. Yet beneath this surface, the invisible forces of past trauma, ambition, and shifting priorities were exerting pressure. Small moments of misunderstanding, hesitation, and subtle withdrawal began to accumulate, forming patterns that would later become central to understanding the evolution of their marriage. Friends and family, observing from the outside, were largely unaware of these early fissures. To them, Meghan and Trevor seemed aligned, happy, and thriving. Public appearances, photographs, and social interactions reinforced the perception of a seamless relationship. But the reality, as Trevor would later reflect, was far more nuanced. Love, while strong, was being tested by private dynamics that the public could never see, and by subtle pressures that only those intimately involved could feel. These cracks also revealed how sensitive and interconnected personal and professional pressures can be. Meghan's career, media attention, and public exposure amplified the challenges posed by private trauma. Trevor's desire for closeness, understanding, and shared future plans highlighted the emotional distances created by unspoken pain. Together, these factors created a complex emotional environment that required care, patience, and insight, qualities that would be increasingly tested in the months to come. In retrospect, these early cracks were not signs of a failing relationship. They were indicators of the normal challenges that arise when private trauma intersects with ambition, public scrutiny, and evolving life expectations. For Trevor, they represented a growing awareness of the depth and complexity of Meghan's experiences. For Meghan, they were reminders of the delicate balance required to maintain intimacy while protecting herself emotionally. And just when it seemed that these challenges could be managed, external pressures began to intersect with internal dynamics in ways neither could have fully anticipated. The combination of ambition, scrutiny, and private grief was creating an environment in which small fissures could grow larger, subtle tensions could escalate, and the foundational dynamics of their marriage could be tested in profound ways. It was in this context that Trevor and Meghan began to confront the realities of navigating love under extraordinary circumstances. The cracks were widening, yes, but they were also illuminating essential truths about communication, trust, and the invisible forces that shape human relationships. Love alone, as Trevor would come to understand, could not resolve the interplay of personal trauma, ambition, and external pressure. It required deep understanding, empathy, and alignment that only time and reflection could provide. But what came next would reveal the consequences of these pressures in ways that neither Trevor nor Meghan could have foreseen. The subtle fissures, once almost invisible, were about to intersect with profound life decisions, shaping the future of their marriage, and altering the story the world would eventually come to know. How do you walk away from someone you once vowed to love forever? How do you decide that the life you imagined together, the dreams you shared, are no longer aligned with reality? For Meghan Markle and Trevor Engelson, the decision to divorce was not sudden. It was the culmination of years of private struggles, subtle tensions, and unspoken truths that quietly reshaped the foundation of their marriage. By the time they began seriously considering separation, Meghan and Trevor had already navigated years of complexity. Their love was real, their connection genuine, yet the interplay of personal trauma, public pressures, and differing ambitions had created challenges neither could ignore. Meghan's private grief, the loss of her womb at 21, had never fully surfaced in conversations about family planning and long-term goals, and the emotional distance this created began to weigh heavily on both partners. Trevor, reflecting on this period, describes a mix of heartbreak and clarity. He loved Meghan deeply. He admired her strength, her resilience, and her ability to navigate life with intelligence and grace. Yet he also recognized that some truths, unspoken and unresolved, were quietly shaping the trajectory of their relationship. Conversations about the future often highlighted gaps in understanding, subtle hesitations, and the invisible impact of private trauma on decisions regarding intimacy, family, and shared life plans. For Meghan, the decision was equally complex. She loved Trevor, valued their bond, and cherished their shared history. But she was also acutely aware of her own needs, her ambitions, and the personal realities she had long managed privately. The weight of past trauma, combined with the pressures of ambition and public scrutiny, made some choices incredibly difficult. How do you balance love for a partner with the reality of your own emotional landscape? How do you reconcile desire for intimacy and family with personal loss and unspoken grief? These questions shaped the difficult conversations that eventually led to their parting. The divorce decision did not happen overnight. It was the result of reflection, dialogue, and an evolving understanding that love, while powerful, cannot always bridge every gap created by personal history, ambition, and private pain. Trevor recounts late nights of discussion, quiet reflections, and moments where both partners realized that the future they envisioned together might no longer be feasible without significant compromise that neither felt fully capable of sustaining without emotional cost. Family and friends played a role in providing perspective, though the ultimate decision rested with Meghan and Trevor. Trusted confidants offered insight, support, and guidance, helping both individuals navigate the emotional complexity of ending a marriage. Yet, even with advice and reassurance, the path forward required courage, clarity, and acceptance of the reality that love alone could not resolve all challenges. Public perception added another layer of difficulty. In Hollywood, divorces are often sensationalized, scrutinized, and dissected. Meghan and Trevor had to consider not only their private lives, but also the impact of public attention. Maintaining dignity, privacy, and emotional integrity became priorities even as they navigated the painful process of separation. Every decision, from timelines to communication, carried the weight of public curiosity and media scrutiny. Amid these pressures, the role of personal trauma remained central. Meghan's experience of losing her womb at 21 had long influenced her emotional approach to intimacy and family planning. For Trevor, understanding the depth of this impact took time, reflection, and emotional processing. Even with love and commitment, some realities required acknowledgement that went beyond support. It required acceptance that certain aspects of personal history could not be altered or fully reconciled within the marriage. The legal and logistical steps of divorce were accompanied by intense emotional reflection. Trevor recalls feelings of grief, regret, and melancholy, not because of a lack of love, but because the relationship they shared, the dreams they had envisioned, and the intimacy they had built could not fully align with the evolving realities of their lives. Divorce, in this context, was not a failure. It was an acknowledgement of human complexity, the intersection of love, trauma, ambition, and circumstance. Even as they finalized the decision, moments of reflection were poignant. Trevor remembers quiet mornings, brief conversations, and the bittersweet acknowledgement that some chapters in life end not because of a lack of devotion, but because circumstances, seen and unseen, render the continuation of a shared path impossible without significant sacrifice. Meghan, too, confronted these emotional landscapes privately, weighing love against self-preservation, ambition against intimacy, and personal needs against shared expectations. Friends and family noted the emotional gravity of the decision. While both Meghan and Trevor remained committed to treating each other with respect and dignity, the reality of parting ways carried the weight of years spent together, shared dreams, and mutual admiration. The divorce was a painful but necessary step, reflecting the complexity of love constrained by private history, ambition, and the pressures of life under public scrutiny. Trevor reflects on the final moments of their marriage with both sorrow and insight. He loved Meghan deeply, yet he understood that their connection, though powerful, could not overcome the cumulative effect of unspoken trauma, rising ambition, and subtle emotional distance. Love, he realized, while essential, is only one element of a sustainable partnership. Alignment, transparency, shared goals, and the ability to navigate private pain collectively are equally vital. Meghan's private experiences, the grief she carried from losing her womb, had remained a quiet but influential force throughout their marriage. Its impact on emotional availability, intimacy, and long-term planning had subtly shaped decisions, conversations, and expectations. The divorce decision, therefore, was not about blame or failure. It was about reconciling human realities with love and recognizing that sometimes the most compassionate choice is to let go. In the aftermath, both Meghan and Trevor began a period of reflection and adjustment. Personal growth, emotional processing, and the navigation of public perception became central priorities. For Trevor, it was a time to understand not only the trajectory of the relationship, but also the broader implications of personal trauma on love and partnership. For Meghan, it was an opportunity to recalibrate, to pursue ambition, and to manage private grief while stepping into an increasingly public life. Even years later, the decision remains a defining moment. It highlights the intersection of love, personal history, and ambition, illustrating that even profound connections can reach a point where separation is necessary, not due to lack of affection, but because of the inherent complexities of human experience. Trevor Engelson's willingness to speak publicly.